Welcome to today's Explainer, where we're going to unravel a seriously fascinating mystery about how innovation actually works. I want you to imagine, just for a second, a brilliant machine that arrived way before the world was ready to handle it. A piece of tech so far ahead of the curve that it honestly seemed like it belonged to a completely different century. Today, we're digging into a story where the future didn't just arrive. It arrived, completely disappeared, and then had to be invented all over again. And that brings us to the fundamental question we really have to ask ourselves. What happens when the future arrives too early? Think about it for a minute. The machine works perfectly. The science backing it up is totally sound. The core idea is nothing short of brilliant. And yet, almost nobody's actually ready for it. The infrastructure just isn't there, consumer habits haven't formed yet, and the market simply rejects it. Decades go by, the world finally catches up, looks around, and suddenly realizes something absolutely wild. The future had already been invented. And the absolute best example of this phenomenon actually began in the 19th century, long before anyone had even dreamed of a smartphone, a computer, or the internet. The answer to our little riddle is the electric car. Now, today, we constantly hear about EVs as this cutting-edge technology of tomorrow, right? But more than a century ago, electric cars were already out there aggressively competing on the bustling streets of major American cities. And for a brief, incredible moment in history, they had a very real chance of winning the whole race.
Okay, let's dive into Section 1, a technology out of time, the late 19th century tech battle.
So at the end of the 19th century, the future of human transportation was locked in this massive technological battle, and the winner absolutely had not been decided yet. Steam, gas, and electric vehicles were all fighting it out for dominance. And when we break down that battle, the electric car had some massive, clear advantages over the competition. If you were a driver back then, you could choose a gas or steam car that was deafeningly loud or an electric car that was remarkably quiet. You could pick a gas car that choked the streets with heavy exhaust or an EV with literally zero exhaust at the point of use. Plus, early gas cars were notoriously awful to start. You had to manually wrestle with these complicated gears and hand cranks. Electric cars? Super easy to operate. No complex gears, no breaking your arm trying to crank start the engine. Because of these exact advantages, early electric vehicles weren't just some quirky science experiment, they were highly attractive and totally commercially viable. By the early 1900s, they were rolling off production lines and being sold, and they were marketed heavily toward wealthy urban customers who absolutely loved them. I mean, they didn't fill the dense city streets with suffocating smoke, they offered a really smooth ride, and they skipped all the messy, frustrating starting processes of those early combustion engines. For a while there, the electric car was the most promising future of transportation. Which brings us to Section 2, the first electric era, how the economics changed. But then, the market experienced this sudden massive shift. The narrative flipped almost overnight, turning the electric car from the inevitable future into basically a technological footnote for the next 100 years. The economics of transportation just completely changed. Let's look at how this built up, because it's this rapid-fire succession of changes that gave gasoline an unbeatable advantage. Boom, 1908, Henry Ford introduces the moving assembly line, dramatically slashing the cost of gas cars and pumping them out at an enormous scale. Moving into the 1910s, paved roads start expanding way beyond the city centers. Suddenly, people actually wanted to travel further than just across town. And then, by the 1920s, gas stations are popping up everywhere as the oil industry massively expands. As all those external conditions changed, the weaknesses of the early electric vehicle became literally impossible to ignore. Battery tech back then severely limited how far you could go. The charging infrastructure was, well, incredibly primitive, assuming you could even find it outside a major city. Once those new roads meant drivers wanted to take long road trips, gasoline just offered a level of convenience that electricity simply could not touch at the time. And just like that, the electric car faded out of the mainstream. Let's move to Section 3, the ecosystem trap. Why superior tech can lose. You see, the electric car didn't fail because the concept of an electric motor was flawed. Not at all. It fell into a trap. We call it a technological ecosystem. This is the surrounding system of infrastructure, economics, and consumer behavior that any product absolutely requires to succeed. Technology never, ever competes in isolation. It competes inside these ecosystems. A product can be technically superior, it can be quiet, clean, easy to use, and still lose completely because the charging stations aren't there, the manufacturing economics favor a rival, or consumers have just adapted to a totally different system. And that brings us to today. The electric car lay dormant for decades. But slowly, under the surface, the conditions within our ecosystem started to change.
We developed incredibly powerful lithium-ion batteries with wildly better energy density. Computer software and power electronics became smart enough to manage energy and navigation effortlessly. Fast-charging networks started spreading across the globe. And governments worldwide began heavily cracking down on emissions. The environment changed entirely.
Suddenly, that exact same basic idea from more than a century ago became a commercial powerhouse all over again. The modern electric vehicle, the one forcing the world's biggest automakers to rewrite their entire business models today, it isn't just some nostalgic return to the past. It is the direct result of combining a really old, proven concept with a brand new, highly supportive technological ecosystem. Those early pioneers weren't foolish at all. They were just building in a world that couldn't support their vision yet.
Section 4. The future invented twice. Beyond the electric car.
Now, this explainer isn't just about cars. The electric car is really just one glaring example of a much, much broader trend. When we zoom out, history is absolutely packed with tech that showed up way before its time. Video calling was in labs long before Zoom was part of our daily grind. Tablet computers were kicking around decades before the iPad exploded. E-commerce was technically a thing way before any of us had the infrastructure to actually trust paying for something online. Even artificial intelligence, the big buzzword of our era, had its foundational research start way back in the 1950s. In every single one of these cases, the fundamental idea wasn't wrong, the timing was just off.
When you're living through rapid technological change, it's really hard to see what's actually going on. When a new technology flops, our knee-jerk assumption is almost always, oh, well, that was just a terrible idea. But the reality? It's usually a completely different story. The reality is almost always an immature ecosystem. The product might just be waiting on faster processors, cheaper batteries, better cell networks, or honestly, just a population that's finally comfortable enough to use it.
When those missing puzzle pieces finally fall into place, an old idea can suddenly change the world, and it creates this incredibly strange circular pattern in innovation. Step 1, the very first attempt proves to us that something is technically possible. It sells us the dream, right? But it usually fails commercially. Step 2, the second attempt rolls around when the world is finally prepared to make it practical. Progress, as it turns out, does not move in a straight line. Sometimes it literally moves in circles.
So, why does all of this actually matter? Well, if you're an entrepreneur, this is a massive warning sign. A genuinely brilliant idea will crash and burn if the ecosystem isn't ready for it. For investors, it's the ultimate proof that timing really is everything. For engineers, it shows that the technical roadblocks you're hitting today are just temporary. And for the rest of us, it reveals that progress is beautifully circular. Ideas fade away, and then they roar back. Concepts that one generation totally dismissed become absolutely essential to the next.
Which brings us right back to where we started, summed up perfectly by this thought. The future is sometimes invented twice. Those first electric cars weren't waiting around for a better invention. The core invention was already fantastic. They were just waiting for the rest of the world to catch up. The future isn't always some shiny new thing. Sometimes it's just an old idea that finally got the tools it needed to win.
So, I want to leave you with one final provocative question to chew on today. If the electric car, video calling, and tablet computers were all invented decades before their time, what seemingly failed, forgotten tech of today is just sitting quietly in a drawer somewhere, waiting for the world's ecosystem to catch up tomorrow? Seriously, think about that. If you enjoy this explainer and you want to uncover more wild stories about the inventions that eventually change our world, make sure to subscribe. We'll see you next time.